Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another series in CPD in 43. This is our May event coming from ARC Jobs, Aylin Round, Salaries, Cost of Living, National Minimum Wage, and more. As usual, we will have a Q&A session after the talk, but I will hand it straight over. So please do, if you have any pressing questions that you want to raise, please do add them into the chat box and we will field those. But without further ado, I will hand it over to Aylin and I will hide away in the background.
All right, I'll just go and share my screen so you can see my presentation as well. Right, let me know if you can all see that, please.
Yeah.
Yep, okay, cool. So as Osman just said, I will talk about cost of living, national minimum wage, unpaid overtime, and well, a lot more than that. So these are the talking points. So if you do have any questions, just write them down and then I will try to do my best to answer them at the end. The presentation is about 20 to 25 minutes long, so I would hope there's enough time for your answer, for your questions. So the cost of living, I mean, it has impacted all of us with the rising cost of food, rent, electricity. I mean, I think there was not a single person who did not feel the impact of that. But what most of you know that the cost of living, for example, in London is much higher than in the north. However, I feel many people don't consider the cost of living when deciding to relocate to a new city, especially recent graduates. And many are keen, obviously, to live and work in London without realizing that, yeah, maybe you do earn more money, but you actually end up, or you could end up with less money at the end of each month. And it's a well-known problem that architectural salaries aren't as high as most people expect. Praxis say it's caused by the low fees. Others will say it's due to the competition, or that the competition is too high from non-qualified professionals, or that the work gets outsourced to other countries. And I mean, no matter the reason, I highly recommend that you sit down and really think about your finances before moving, because there's no point of accepting a job and then being miserable because you think that you made the wrong choice. So as just said, you know, the cost of living, London versus Manchester, I thought it's a good example because there are a lot of people moving from London to Manchester because there are a lot of opportunities available. So I thought I'd just choose like £28,000 in London, which is more for a junior person. And then in Manchester, I would have assumed that they would earn roughly 25k. Obviously, then after tax, you would have to think about that as well. You obviously got slightly more money after tax if you're on the higher salary. But if you break it down and just think of rent, food, public transport, and utilities, obviously your overall costs in London are so much higher, and the rent is just such a killer in my eyes. And what I did was I used the cost of living calculator, which anyone can use, and this is just a guideline because I appreciate everyone's got different standard of living, what they're looking for, how much they're spending. And just to let you know, the rent is literally a shared accommodation outside the city centre, because I don't think most people could not afford to rent something in the city centre if you're on a 28k salary. But I think what's interesting though is, although you've got all your costs, like with the rent, food, utilities, and public transport, you actually you only end up with just over £465 per month to pay for your phone bill, for any hobbies, for eating out, for any household items, saving, for holidays. Whereas in Manchester, you end up with nearly £1,000 per month. So that's what I said earlier, like, yes, you do earn a higher salary. However, you actually end up with less in London because of the cost of living. So again, it's just something to consider, and doing that using the cost of living calculator is definitely a good way, especially if you're not really sure where to move to and how far your salary will get you. And I'm fairly confident that most of you have come across the REBA salary guide. In it states that technologists earn between 30,700 and 40,700 per annum. The problem I've noticed is that some architectural practices use these as a current salary guide. However, this is a salary report that uses data from last year. That means it's not up to date and pretty much outdated. So if any practice uses this particular chart, I would say you would have to add at least 5 to 10% to these figures, because it's just not including what's happening right now. And there's no chance you will offer competitive salary if you are looking at this right now. And I also think the salary guide is quite London focused. So to be honest, yes, 40,700 is probably for a very senior person. In the north, I would say Manchester, around like 40k, 43k mark. But again, I will talk about the salary ranges in a minute and why I'm not a huge fan of them anymore. So these screenshots are from the National Career Services page, and it's like from the government. And it's good that they mention the architectural technologist and technician and what it involves, you know, what a normal working week looks like, which skills you need. And at first I looked at it and I thought, yeah, okay, not bad, looks okay. And then obviously looked a bit further. And then you see that the salary starts at 20,000 up to 60. I mean, not only is that under the living wage, but also under the national minimum wage. And I think if someone doesn't know much about what it's like, the career progression of an architectural technologist or a technician, you might think, okay, I could earn like 40 or 60,000 pounds in, I don't know, like in 4, 5, 6 years. But I genuinely do not know many ATs who actually earn 50 or 60k. So again, lack of transparency, lack of knowledge. That's another thing why I feel like there's just a lot of misinformation out there about the profession, and salaries is obviously a huge problem about that. So as I said earlier, I will talk about the salary ranges and why I think there are actually issues about it. I think that they are limiting people's earning potentials. It seems like you are being paid based on your job title and years of experience rather than what you can bring to the table. So do I think that architectural salaries will go up anytime soon? I mean, probably not. The reason why I say this is because unless practices are able to increase their fees, I don't see how they can afford to pay their staff more. And yeah, I mean, the salaries have been stagnant for over 10 years now, with the cost of living, people studying, costing them nearly over 9k on tuition fees, and then you've got the maintenance fees as well. So people end up with a lot of student debt as well. So something else to consider in the whole thing. The skilled worker visa. So I try and keep this one brief because I could talk about this for a long time. I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, you would have heard that the government has changed the immigration rules on the 4th of April this year. The salary threshold for anyone coming to the UK on a skilled worker visa has increased to £38,700 per year. Obviously, it is quite a challenging salary because not only do overseas qualified people find it tricky to come here with no UK experience, but now it's also reaching that new threshold, which is quite high for the profession. And you've got the two different occupation codes. So the first one, the 24521, is for chartered architectural technologists. And the other one, the 3120, is for architectural technicians. The two numbers I've highlighted are for the new entrants. So that is option E. The new entrants is basically for anyone who, well, basically as a new entrant, you need to at least meet one of the following criteria. It's like you're under the age of 26 on the day you apply, you're currently on a UK student visa, and so on. So yes, if they do meet those requirements, they would have to earn at least the £30,960 per annum. And I really don't know how much you guys know about this whole thing, but there are basically it's nearly 300-page long document, and you've got two different tables. You've got the options A to E, which are for anyone who is coming and applying to the sponsorship after the 4th of April. And then there's a second table, options F to J, which are for anyone who's already received their certificate of sponsorship before the 4th. So again, the salaries are slightly different and they're even lower than that. But again, that is another topic in itself, I would say. So the national minimum wage versus living wage. So two different things. One is basically set by the UK government, that is the national minimum wage, and that changes / increases every year on the 1st of April. And the living wage is set by the Living Wage Foundation. And just to give you a quick overview, so the national minimum wage has recently changed. So from the 1st of April, it has gone up. They also changed the age band, so anyone from the age of 21 or over will be applicable to, well, they need to earn at least £11.44. And obviously they've got the age 18 to 20, under 18, and the apprentices as well. So I had received quite a few messages from people who said, oh, my salary is still under that because it hasn't increased. So they were already on the national minimum wage figures and their employers haven't increased it. So if that's the case, I would highly suggest you go to them and just show them, just have a normal conversation, just say, hey, look, I've noticed that my salary hasn't increased. I would have to meet the national minimum wage. But I would hope that nobody is in that situation right now. But just to show you really what does it even mean to earn £11.44 if you're working full-time hours. So you can just see it's 20,820 up to, and I did the 40 hours as well, because I know a lot of you guys will work a minimum 40 hours per week. Then we've got the living wage, which is set by the Living Wage Foundation. So you might have come across that logo as well. So these guys say in order to pay, not a comfortable life, but just to pay for your bills, basically, you would have to earn, the hourly rate is £13.50 in London and £12 outside London. And again, what does that mean? If you just look at the hourly rate versus the hours, it's definitely quite different if you look at the 40 hours, if you're in London and in the UK, versus if I go back to the £23,795, right? So it is definitely quite a jump. And if you live in London, I mean, your costs are higher, so you really need that. However, the really important part for you guys is if you are working at a REBA charter praxis, they have to pay you the living wage, which means either the £12 or the £13.15. It's also noted in the REBA Code of Conduct, where it says charter practices are required to pay all staff, including freelance staff, apprentices, and students, at least the living wage, as defined by the Living Wage Foundation. So again, if you are interviewing a praxis or they making you an offer or giving you an offer and the salary is under less than the living wage, I mean, definitely have a conversation and see what's going on. But yeah, they would have to do that. They can't go beneath that. And yeah, just how much do you make after tax? So I moved from Bristol to Scotland and now I live in Dubai. So until moving to Edinburgh, I had no idea that England and Scotland had two different tax codes. And so this is just a screenshot from the government website where it literally just shows you the income tax rates for England. It's the same as for Scotland, actually. So the personal allowance, you don't pay any tax up to 12,550, and then it goes up, the threshold goes up and the tax rate goes up as well. So again, you can see that. I can share the presentation with you afterwards as well if you like. And this is the tax rates for Scotland. So you can see they've done a bit more. So you've got again, no personal tax, so no tax on your personal allowance. Then you've got 19%, 20%, 21, 42, 45 and 48. So I don't know what happened to the number 30 or anything, like they just skipped straight from 20 to 40, which is great. So yeah, but again, what does that actually mean, right? So what I did is I just calculated what your take home after tax would be. So when I say take home, it's actually your salary minus income tax and national insurance. This does not include your pension or your student loans you would have to pay back if you have any. And the numbers highlighted in green, it just shows you that, let's say you earn £25,000, you earn slightly more if you're based in Scotland. But because of the different tax rates, once you hit the 30k per year mark, you actually earn slightly more in England. I mean, it's actually like a couple of quid at first, and it probably just changes once you hit like the 60, 65k, where I mean it's like £2,000, but £2,000 is £2,000, right? So I don't want to dismiss that, but it's definitely interesting just to realize that A, yeah, there's a difference, and B, how much is it? And the impact of unpaid overtime. So I've been talking about this quite a lot on my LinkedIn as well, and I think we all know within architecture that it is unfortunately common for people to work long hours, sometimes without getting paid for overtime. I mean, not only will it impact you financially, but it could also impact you mentally as well, because you'd be just exhausted. One thing to keep in mind though is your employer is obligated to pay you at least the minimum wage, and if your salary goes beneath that, that's illegal. So let's say you're actually they're just paying you minimum wage. I mean, why would you do unpaid overtime if they're not paying for that? Because you're straight under the legal minimum, which, I mean, what's the point of that? You're just getting in trouble with that one. It's not worth it. So this is literally just to show you how the unpaid overtime impacts your pay. So this is a screenshot from we've created an unpaid overtime calculator, which is free to use, which is on my website. And all you've got to do is just input your salary, your annual salary, how many hours you work, how much unpaid overtime you do per week, like roughly, and if you're based in London or outside London. And then you've got and what else? And just the age, yeah, because of the minimum wage, national minimum wage. So in this example, let's say someone earns 28k based in London on a 37.5-hour contract, and you just do 4 hours of unpaid overtime per week. I mean, it doesn't sound too bad, right? Like 4 hours is less than an hour per day. But the problem is that you're already under the living wage if you are working at a REBA chartered praxis. So not great. At least you're still over the minimum wage. But something else I want people to understand is that you are lowering your hourly rate. So from £14.36, you're just dropping it down to £12.97. And just to give you another example of this, let's say you're a more senior person, you're working, or your salary is 37.5k per year, working 40 hours in London, and you do 1 hour per week of unpaid overtime. I mean, yeah, it will take you a while to get under the living wage, but I think this is the important figure for you guys. From literally £37,500, you are just dropping down to like 33,333, which is a funny number in itself. So keep that in mind if you are doing all this unpaid overtime, because the thing is, it will impact you guys at one point. Yes, we're all working hard, and there will be deadlines. I get it. You know, the whole team has to work together to finish the drawings, you know, so the client is happy as well. But if that keeps happening over and over again, what will happen is you just make more errors. More errors means more work, more overtime. And the more time you spend at work, the less time you have to recharge, to switch off. You have less time with your friends and family. then at some point you might even start resenting your praxis because you're just not having enough time, just literally just to switch off. And it is so important. And what could happen is you could either call in sick, or you're probably looking for a new job, because there's only so much someone can do, right? Especially if the money is not backing you up on that one. But from an employer's point of view, what you guys do is, if you just keep overworking your staff, again, it starts off, they just make more errors, your clients are unhappy, customers are unhappy, it will just create more work. Trust me, the office environment will be bad, it will be toxic. They might call in potential sick days as well, which means the work is not going away. That means the rest of the team has to pick it up. Again, people will be unhappy, staff might leave, and hiring is not a quick and simple process. It will take time, even if you find someone, for them to actually start and sit down and, you know, just know what they're doing. It can take several months as well. So yeah, you could lose projects, you know, if you don't have the manpower or the people behind you who can work on the projects. Again, there are obviously ways to protect yourself as an employer, and as an employee. So, I mean, paid overtime would be the ideal scenario, I would say. But again, if they're not paying you right now, there's a small chance that they will pay you for it all of a sudden. There's also toil, which is time off in lieu, which is it's literally is when an employer offers time off to workers who have gone above and beyond their contracted hours. So that means maybe you have accumulated 10 hours over a month time, or maybe 2 weeks. And then they say, okay, you can take this time off as an extra holiday, basically. Or your company will offer you flexible working, which I think is probably one of the easiest things to do. So let's say somebody worked, stayed in the office for 2 hours, you know, after everyone already left. They could either come in 2 hours later if that's okay, or they have a longer lunch break, or they leave earlier. So again, it's always a bit based on trust as well, because I know some employers don't trust their staff, and they're getting micromanaged. So if you don't trust your staff, you should have not hired them, in my opinion. So again, I would say if you do this, you need to have this written in your contract, though. That is super important. A lot can happen, a lot, you know, you're doing an interview, you're like, yeah, okay, what about hybrid working? What about flexible working? Yeah, no problem, we do this. And then once it happens, you say, okay, like, what happens? Do I not get a time off in lieu? Do I not get flexible working? Sorry, it's not in your contract. So if you get a new offer or you have an interview, just read through the contract, make sure everything is correct. If it's not written in there, you've got no leg to stand on, unfortunately. And yeah, just ask them just to amend the contract. It's always doable. And just to really summarize, and I think it's just my key points really, your base salary is not your take-home pay. That is really important to understand, especially for juniors. Yes, relocating to London might give you more money, but the cost of living is much higher, meaning you could end up with less money. So do consider other areas, like in the north. I always say there already is a huge shortage of ATs in Newcastle. So why should you just move down to London if you've also got some amazing opportunities up there? Plus the cost of living is much cheaper, and which could give you a really good, you know, solid foundation as well. And understand that REBA charter practices have to pay you the living wage. And again, yes, there are ways for you to protect yourself in terms of the, you know, with the, how do they handle the overtime? Do you get paid? Do you get toil? Do you get a, do they offer the flexible working? But again, you just need to have that one in your contract. So this is actually it. So I left it quite short and sweet, I hope, because I know that there might be a couple of questions coming in. Also happy to answer anything about Dubai if anyone is interested. But yeah, that was me.
Thank you so much, Aylin. You've raised a lot of really interesting points. We've got a point raised by James saying that the Hayes guide might provide some better data. Do you have any sort of experience and feedback on that?
I mean, Hayes, obviously, they do get a lot of data, and their data is, well, I guess the difference is they get data from different points, right? So you've got Manchester, you've got Newcastle, you've got Edinburgh, you've got Bristol, and it is a bit of a better representation than the REBA. I personally don't think that the REBA guide is very good. It's very London focused, and it's not really showing the full truth, and it's backdated, whereas someone from Hayes, for example, they do theirs every year, and it's a bit less backdated. So yeah, Hayes got, I think, a good one. Haven't looked at it in a while, but there are some other ones as well. I do think that some of the larger recruitment companies are doing a really good job on that one, but again, it's like, is this narrowing people down again, you know, where this is the minimum, this is the top, and yeah, that is just something to think about, really. Are we just narrowing ourselves down too much?
Interesting. In essence, you're saying, is it creating boundaries rather than sort of as information? Yeah, that's interesting. And so you mentioned a few other sources. What are those other sources that you would sort of your go-to that you think would be good to have a look at?
You mean for the salaries?
Yeah.
It's quite difficult because I always hear about, oh, my friend earns X amount of money. They are in London, they are doing this. And I was just like, okay, but do you guys do the same job? Are you at the same practice? And I think the main difference, if let's say the money isn't there, what about career progression? You know, is that there? Does the company do regular reviews where everyone's on the same page? And they do want you to get from a junior, for example, to associate level at some point. Is the career, or is the structure there to support you guys? Do they offer a good benefits package? Because I think that is actually one of the main differences these days. Like, what do they offer? Because if hybrid working is on the cards, like, not many people will say no to that, you know, especially if the option is there. So in terms of the salaries, obviously speak to your network as well. But again, I find it quite difficult because we're all like in the same bubble, basically. So we will all meet or reach those same ceilings, those salary ceilings. So it can be quite hard to all of a sudden go out and just find someone who's like a bit of a unicorn and just got so much money. But I think what's worth considering, though, is the different sectors. Nuclear pays a lot more. Even housing developers, there's a lot more money in there than the typical architectural practice, which, you know, is a shame because we all get into, or you guys get into architecture to design and work on beautiful projects. But maybe have a look at different sectors. That is something I would highly recommend, because that is where you would see potentially the biggest salary increases, and not just locations or practices.
Interesting. Thank you for that. We have a question in from Lee. It's relatively open-ended, so obviously please answer as you see fit. How do salary versus cost of living in the UK and other professions compare to, say, for example, Dubai and other European locations, etc.?
So with other European locations, I think it's such a common problem. I don't think the UK is special in terms of having the low wages versus the cost of living, like the high cost of living. I know that there are a lot of Italians who are, there are a lot more Italian architects out there than in the UK. B, they earn a lot less money, and that's the reason why a lot are leaving Italy as well. I know Germany has the same problem as well. So I think whenever I did a post on my LinkedIn or wrote an article about the salaries, I received like messages from other people as well, like from different countries, saying we've got the same problem, like, which is interesting. That is actually such a worldwide issue about the salaries. Dubai, I would say, yes, the salaries are better, they are higher, but the working environment is very different here. It's a lot more fast-paced. Projects are usually bigger as well, and the clients have a lot more money, so they will put a lot of pressure, and they will give you some impossible timelines. So, and the working hours here are standard are 48 hours, and not just the 40. So plus the overtime here, so that's not going away. So, but then I think Dubai has a lot of, like, it's very different, obviously, from the UK, right? So I moved here for particular reasons, and I know there are other people working in Saudi as well, which are on very good money, but it comes at a cost to move to Saudi as well. So it all goes pros and cons, to be honest.
Okay, great. We've got a couple more questions coming in. So we've got a question from Benjamin. I think we briefly discussed this when I last spoke with you, Aylin. There's a quite a contingent within the institute who have their own practices. Some who are maybe a single person. The question is in from Benjamin. It says, "Can you please comment on how to charge for your time from a self-employed perspective?" Um, I personally, I do feel as though that's part of the issue about people not knowing how much to charge, and that perpetuating throughout the industry and trickling through up and down and down and up and so on. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. That's a tricky one, by the way. I think
Obviously.
at first, yeah, because I think at first you don't know what to do. It's like when I started my own business, I was like, am I charging too much? Am I charging too little? Like, what is going on? So I think, first of all, you really have to think about your time and your expenses. So really write down everything you pay for your licenses, for like your software licenses, for if you have an office, if you work from home, really write down all your costs, then double check how long would it take you to do certain drawings, certain projects, and then over time you can fine tune it, because at first you just want the projects in, right? So I will completely appreciate that you might undersell yourself, right? You might work longer than you expected. So instead, you thought it might take you 10 hours, it might take you 20 hours, but you can't charge them, right? Like you don't want to charge them more because you need a good review, you need referrals. So I think at first it will be really tough. But I know Lee has done something really good. He shared with me how he actually charges his, how he broke down his fees as well. And it was really interesting. There were a couple of things I didn't even think about. So maybe I can message Lee and see if he's happy to share that one as well. But yeah, and then I think you just have to be super realistic with how many hours it will actually take you. And I think over time you will really understand, okay, this is the size of the project. This will take me X amount of hours to do, and then do the invoice. There will be trial and error, 100%, and it won't be easy, I think, at first. But yeah, hopefully, yeah, I will message Lee and see if he's happy maybe to share that information as well, because he's got a really good little spreadsheet and a little presentation on that as well.
Great. You did briefly mention about perks. So I know obviously you've come across a lot of different roles across a lot of geographical locations. Is there any sort of, I don't know, like the top 5 perks that you sort of, aside of, say, for example, the bare bones of salary, you mentioned about flexible working. Is there any other sort of others that sort of jump to mind and you go, oh, do you know what? That's actually a nice perk.
So I think obviously time at the moment is one of the biggest ones, right? So hybrid working, I think, is huge. As I said, I don't know many people who would say no to that. Just to have it as an option, right? You don't have to take it, but it's there. Just the flexible, because a lot of you guys have families, so coming in and out later or earlier, or just pick up the kids from school, drop them off. I think that is a really good benefit. Enhanced maternity and paternity leave, it's huge. So if someone can offer that, you should just shout off the roof, because it is such a good selling point. And what else would I say? Just the career progression, like genuinely stick to it. Like, don't just say it, but really help people and give them, everyone should have a mentor. Doesn't matter how senior you are in my eyes, because you will always learn something. So coach, like doing the career development, really helping them. The mentoring, huge. And what else would I say? I mean, company car, I don't know. Like, personally, I mean, I can't drive, so I can't really say too much about that. But I also think enhanced pension, so more like a salary sacrifice, that is quite attractive to a lot of people as well.
Great. And there was a question which I think you could take out further. Theo was asking, is Dubai worth it as a whole? But I presume it can be taken into sort of the bits that you was discussed about thinking about carefully where you want to move, why you want to move. As you mentioned, say Nottingham, London, Manchester, and so on. So maybe sort of intertwine it with that. So if you are looking to move abroad, obviously there's a lot to think about, not
Yeah.
just salary, but yeah, if you could go into that a little bit more, please, that'd be much appreciated.
Yeah, sure. So Dubai. So I've been here for 2 months now. I've been meeting a lot of practice owners as well, and been talking to people who have made the move, architects and ATs, you know, from the UK over to Dubai, and like the overall feedback is great. Yes, I think people who have done the move, they thought it through. It's not just like, or I'm bored at work, I want something new, I'm going to book my flights to Dubai. It's nothing like it. You really have to think about it, and you need to, it doesn't happen overnight, because moving to Dubai is quite expensive. So unless you don't have your financials in place, I would say think about it. Because the rental situation is very different here. We've literally had to pay our year's rent upfront, the whole lot upfront. Other landlords will accept it in 4 to 6 checks as well. Then if you have children, all the schools are private here, so you have to pay the school fee as well. So I would say moving to Dubai has got a lot of upfront costs, but it's worth it if you are driven and willing to work. And as I said, it's very fast paced. You will most likely work on some incredible projects. If you join the right praxis, you will work with some of the most talented architectural professionals together, because Dubai brings over a lot of the best architects and professionals. And I think being surrounded by that is something incredible. So, and I know a lot of people are bored of the UK in terms of the procurement. Everything is very slow, and you know, the planning applications and everything is taking very long. Whereas here, when I spoke to people, they've been at practice for 2 or 3 years, the amount of projects they worked on is just incredible. Like, I've not seen, I'll be very surprised to see something similar in the UK, to be honest, because everything's obviously a bit more slow. So overall, obviously, Dubai is just a city. It's like, I mean, not just a city, but Dubai is Dubai, right? So there's more. You've got more of the Middle East, you've got more of Saudi. Everything comes with its pros and cons. So if you're looking after the big money, or for the big money, Saudi could be good, but then you probably live in a compound and there's no alcohol, you know, like maybe the schools aren't as good, and you just work and just commute back and forth, back and forth. So everything comes with its pros and cons. So if you're serious about it, I would just say, just do your research. There are a lot of expats out here who have done it, and I think a lot of people are more than happy to share some of the pros and cons, really.
Great, thank you for that. Just looking through the questions, just want to make sure we got every single one. The regarding sort of getting in touch with yourself, I presume in yourself is through ARC Jobs and maybe via socials, if that's appropriate.
Yes, that's correct. So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only one called Aylin Round on LinkedIn, so I'll be very surprised if you can't find me.
Classic. And then sorry, we've got two quick ones in towards the bottom. Another message from James. I know some MCIATs and FCIATs on well over 6 figures in Dubai. More of a comment from Lee, more of a comment, but to show how stagnant our industry is, minimum wage has gone up by 2.36 times in 20 years. Average salaries in 2003 was 35k. If this increased by 2.36 times, the average would now be 82.5. Don't know if those are questions or more statements, really.
I
But
mean,
if
that's
you'd like,
definitely a statement, isn't it? Like, I think he's right. Like, it just shows you like what happened 20 years ago. It probably was enough money, but to live now and to do everything, it's more. Uh, it's a tough career, isn't it? Really, like
hmm,
to pay for everything with the cost of living and the student fees, university fees going up as well. It's definitely quite a luxury.
definitely. Um, any final thoughts before we call it a day?
No, like thank you so much. I know that was a lot to talk. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I tried to touch on like for you guys and for praxis owners as well. So yeah, it's quite a big topic to be honest. So maybe I should have done a bit less.
No, no, I
But
completely understand, Aylin. If you could be so kind as to send across that presentation, I can then
sure,
share it around to everyone that's registered.
cool.
This will then be obviously, as it's being recorded, it will be uploaded to YouTube in due course, hopefully at some point this week. And then also we do have a active schedule of events coming up. So just so everyone's aware, we are fully booked from now until the end of next year, with the exception of a few months. So we have, if I just go through it very quickly, for June, we have an event, a CPD and 43 party wall. And technical guidance. In July, we have one on key control of condensation. In August, we have one on building refurbishment systems for retrofit and conservation. In September, we have an ESG sustainable finance in the built environment. October, earth centered design, working with nature. November, transition from 2D to 3D. December, blue and green roofs with smart control devices. January, business of architecture. February, Spec Studio, and then we have a few other events dotted throughout the year. So we have one from BSI, Architects Benevolent Society, 60th anniversary of the Institute, update on planning and ecological lighting design. So please do let me know if you have anything specific you'd like us to fill the remainder of 2025. We do have a few gaps left. An email will be going out to the membership hopefully soon as well, just highlighting the specific events that we have upcoming and the gaps that we have. And obviously, if there's anything that's pressing that you want us to broach, then we can obviously cover those bits. Thank you so much, Aylin. It's been really appreciated. Thank you for logging in from Dubai. I presume it might be dinner time soon. Um, so, but I look forward to speaking to you soon as well. And thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you so much, everyone.